Going very slowly. Yeah, so I want views that will help me to decide in terms of landing of the stent. Yeah, so let's give another tint. Perfect. You didn't shut off that diagonal branch, so that's good.
Primary PCI is a huge challenge for the South African state sector. A lot of our population, the black patients predominantly, aren't really aware of acute myocardial infarction and the typical symptoms. Then the next issue is the EMS. You know, most of the developed world, European, American countries have got a very good system where the EMS go to patients' locations, immediately do ECG, and that ECG is automatically scanned or transferred to a PCI capable center, and a decision gets made, STEMI or no STEMI. You know, so everything gets done within the 2-hour window that we target to achieve.
How long does it take on average for a patient with STEMI to reach a hospital here in South Africa?
We want people to be at a cath lab hospital or a hospital that can treat them within 60 minutes on the longest, to give them a fair chance of preventing myocardial cell death. The average patient that arrives with me at my hospital, and I think most of my colleagues, would be between 2 and 6 hours, and that can be as long as 12 to 18 hours depending on where they come from. So that's very sad. It's not like in some Europe countries where you can phone and be in a cath lab in 15 minutes, which is possible. So yes, but it doesn't mean we mustn't try to shorten that period.
In the private sector, a lot of the hospitals do offer primary PCI. No matter what time a patient comes in, if they need to be taken to the cath lab urgently, we can take them immediately to the cath lab. Primary PCI doesn't really get offered sort of after hours in a lot of the public hospitals. So there we'll try and thrombolize, stabilize the patient, and then do an elective angiogram the next morning.
Okay.
About 12.2% of all deaths is cardiac related, which is quite significant, and half of them is at the younger than 65, which is a lot. And cardiovascular disease is one of the 10 highest prevalent diseases in South Africa of the non-communicable disease, and in the next 10 years the percentage will at least double.
Well, we look at the burden of disease, a vast expanding population, to be able to bring first world medicine, gold standard of treatment in PCI, endovascular, to Africa and help, I think, improve lives of our patients that we treat.
What is Crossroads Education Institute here in South Africa?
Crossroads is the only unbiased medical education institute in Africa that is funded commercially. Under the guidance and directorship of Professor Jean Marceau, the father of PCR, he brought the philosophy of by and for the people in South Africa to uplift the training and education of people of the cardiology and endovascular specialities in South Africa.
One of the fantastic things about Crossroads is that it doesn't just look at what best practice in the developed world is. It also takes into account the areas that people are working in South Africa, and changes and alters its program to accommodate both people working in the private as well as the public sector, providing us with ways of dealing with problems in both affluent as well as needy communities.
Crossroads is extremely important for us, as you know that we train in the public sector, so there's a bit of limitation in terms of experience and also skills. So it's important that we come here in a well-organized course where we can get to meet and mingle and ask questions from the more experienced guys. So there's a lot of knowledge that we gain. It is absolutely an excellent course that I recommend for all my colleagues to come and attend.
This facility is unique because there is a space for exchange of experience, and everybody is learning from everybody. So I think that's why it's very important for education.
So one of the greatest challenges that we have in South Africa at the moment is an aging population of physicians. So we estimate that between 20 and 25% of the physicians, cardiologists in South Africa will be retiring in the next 5 to 10 years. And that's a problem because we're not training as many young fellows into positions of speciality. One of the things that we need to do for sustainability is to ensure that there are physicians that can provide healthcare to the masses. Yeah. And that's one of the challenges that we have. That's probably our biggest challenge in South Africa.
Once doctors qualify as cardiologists from the university centres and go out into the big wide world, there are no formal educational programs, postgraduate programs in cardiology available in this country, and I think it actually prevails worldwide. And particularly in cardiology, where technology is changing year by year, these colleagues are not getting an opportunity to learn about new techniques and learn about new thoughts and new policies in terms of managing patients.
We don't have any official cath lab course in this country, so that we are reliant on the high standard that the Crossroads programs provide us with. And they are very informative. They do increase our knowledge and our experience in the cath labs, and they're an integral part of our training program now for this country.
So I think the amazing thing about Crossroads, and it's truly amazing, is that you sit in the same room with the leaders of our field, guys who almost invented interventional cardiology, and you sit right next to them in the same room. You get to ask them all the things you never had the opportunity to ask them before. You get to hear their daily practice and see them really not on a huge stage in an audience of 5,000 people, but right next to you. And that makes a huge difference in their learning experience.
So in sub-Saharan Africa, if you go north of the borders of South Africa, we have very specific challenges, and those challenges are really around education. So doctors are trained overseas. They come back to their countries to go and work in their countries, but unfortunately lack the experience or the knowledge to be able to do primary PCR. So a country like Nigeria, which has in excess of 180 million people, has 5 cath labs and not one primary PCR is done there. So very often what we'll do is we'll make those courses in Johannesburg available to the doctors in Africa.
So we run a range of different types of programs depending on the speciality and depending on the target audience. So for example, a lot of our programs focus on case-based discussions. So we'll have lectures, but it will be illustrated with cases so that delegates are able to understand how to apply the theoretical principles in a clinical situation. In an allied professional situation, so that would be for our nurses, radiographers, and clinical technologists, we will run a more interactive, practical focus.
I remember specifically one of the doctors showing us, you have to remember that if you inflate the stent here, you do a corona shift, and this is what happens inside the artery. So it's very much, time is muscle. So the better and the faster it happens, the better for the patient's outcome.
I've been a cyclist most of my adult life. About 2 years ago, things weren't going very well for me in cycling. I was getting overtired, and after examination and procedure, I had 3 stents put into my heart. And I must say it changed my life completely. Once it's done, you feel better almost immediately. It's quite astonishing how the change happens. You can actually feel it happening in your body as the stent is inserted. And it was almost like a miracle. My body reacted exactly the way I expected it to. I just felt that there was enough blood flowing into my heart for the demands that I wanted to put on it. It was such a feeling of joy, of knowing that I'm kind of back in cycling, and I'm very happy. I'm feeling well and I'm feeling happy.
And how are these courses being delivered?
We encourage all our participants to come and bring cases of their own that they want to share with us, to share their cases, share their experiences, and promote interaction between colleagues within the audience. It's not one of criticism, it's one of sharing, one of passing one's own experience onto those cases that were shown.
If you, for example, graduated or finished cardiology training 10 years ago, a lot of technology has come up in the next 10 years, and the current recommendations and guidelines, you would need something like Crossroads.
I think that the ability to discuss your own cases with your colleagues, so there's a peer review element, but also hear the opinions of world leaders on how you're managing your cases. This really can't be matched by any other forum.
How can educational programs like the one we're running here now, like Crossroads, how can that help?
I think it's really important because sometimes it makes the balance between, you know, the evidence-based medicine and real life. So in this kind of session, we can discuss with other colleagues what we are doing every day in our cath lab. And I think it's really important. It's really important.
We decided to enhance our program many years ago by bringing out at least one KOL from Europe to the meetings, and this gives colleagues opportunities to interact with the KOL both within the session and socially afterwards. But it's not just interacting with the KOL, it's interacting with their own colleagues and realizing that talking to a colleague who works down the road from them but they've never spoken for the last 3 months, realizing that the same colleague's having the same trouble with the same ambulance service, for example. So it's sharing experiences with themselves, amongst themselves, that I think is equally of value.
I do think it's important that people understand that it's unbiased. This is not a product training. This is not about one specific product belonging to a company that you're promoting. You're doing much, much more than that.
Absolutely not. It's unbiased. We work with the physicians to learn how to treat their patients better, irrespective of the product or the methodology they're using.
The fact that it's a scientific program that is run by doctors for doctors, that's what makes it so desirable for people to come in, and that's why they keep coming back to the Crossroads Education Institute all the time.
I think with Crossroads, because it's driven by the cardiologist and it's purely educational, so it's not commercially driven, it's purely educational to say this is what's known, this is what should be done. And I think that's why there's a huge buy-in into it.
What can we do more or better?
I would say that I think that the simulation program is for me very important. I always make the comparison with the pilot. You know, we are like an airplane pilot. I think that the younger physician should have simulation program before starting on the patient. And when you have also for the more experience, when you have a new technology, it's better to start on the simulation than to start on the patient.
In the simulation, in the bench testing, you can see really what you are doing if you do up on the strut toward the side branch, do a kissing bone inflation, do a proximal optimization technique, you really understand what you are really doing on the stents.
What we try and get our colleagues to aspire to is to get judgment. Many of these guys in postgraduate cardiology have got knowledge, they know the data, they know the information. They've got some skills because they've been practicing for a while. But they might have limited experience. And creating the environment here we combine all those three hallmarks of a good education is judgment. And judgment is what counts in patient care. When you're in a cath lab at 2 o'clock in the morning and you're faced with a difficult case, you don't think about the trial that was published in Lancet 3 months ago. You look at that and you think, well, in my judgment, all these factors are integrated into my head because of my education. And that gives a good judgment for patient care.
We now have the tools allowing us to have a more balanced life for those that work in the cath lab, allowing the patients to have better outcomes because the staff are in a better space and able to cope better with the situations that take place in the cath lab.
So Kurt, our vision is to take Crossroads to the local countries to meet the needs of the people there, by and for them, and to make sure we go the distance in treating their patients and teaching them how to treat their patients better.
It's sad to see a patient arriving 24 hours later with complications and it could have been treated. Keep in mind that we can reduce the mortality by 50% if we have a good system, and that there's no other medication that can do that. So it's rewarding, it is emotionally rewarding. It means you do something and I have to give something back. That's why I do this.